So this is moments ago. We just got from the Federal Reserve. Yes, we were all waiting for Jerome Powell to have the FOMC meeting, the Federal Reserve meeting, to discuss interest rate hikes. I'm telling you, a few weeks ago, they said we were going to raise interest rates by 0.50 percentage points. They didn't. They scrapped that. It is now 0.75.
Actually, no. What we were told right before the new year was that we would only get rate hikes at 0.25 per time.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Which would mean
So
about 1.5 for the entire year, right? So we as investors went into the year thinking that we will have no more than a one, because we started at zero, right?
Right.
So we thought we will end at no more than 1.5% for the federal interest rate. Well, that is not the case now. The Fed voted to increase the interest rate to zero by 0.75%.
This is huge. I mean, this is an admission to my mind, and I think this shows you that people are losing faith in this. This was a Washington Post front page.
Well, let's finish the news part of it, though, before we opine about it, because I want to make it clear that this is the largest single bump since 1994. And now there's speculation that by the end of the year, rates will be above 3%. So that's twice what we were told going into the beginning of the year.
Right. So to me, it's a huge admission, right? Yes. A few weeks ago, they said 0.5. Earlier in the year, you're right, they said 0.25. So now they've literally in a few weeks, they're racing right now to get their hands on this. We're seeing this in the United States. We're also seeing this in Europe and around the world right now. All of these powers that be, these central banks, are basically admitting that they don't know what the hell they're doing. The world is slowly waking up to the reality that these central bankers royally screwed us over. Here's a Bloomberg piece from today. Take a look at this Bloomberg headline earlier this morning, which said, market households lose faith that Fed can handle inflation. Markets and households lose faith that Fed can handle inflation.
I do have a bit of a problem with that headline because it implies that there was faith previously. Now, the Fed is an unelected body. They do have to vote in order to approve these interest rate hikes, but they pretty much voted together. Today, out of 10 people voting, 9 voted in favor of a 0.75 hike. Only 1 voted in favor of a 0.5 hike. Now, when we got the previous vote on our previous interest rate hike, which happened earlier in the year, it was the same, about 9 out of 10. So remember, these are 10 unelected people making these decisions.
So let's put up this other headline. So this one was, I think we had a reverse there. That was the Washington Post one. But here's the Bloomberg piece. Let's put the Bloomberg one back up here on the screen because I think this headline was pretty telling. There it is. World central banks got it wrong and economies pay the price. Policymakers are now moving much faster than telegraphed. Fed and peers hope to contain long-term inflation expectations. Even after central banks recognize that they got their inflation calls wrong last year, they've continued to flub their policy guidance, threatening greater damage to their credibility, roiling markets, and undermining the pandemic recovery. David, what is the what are gas prices? I would love to hear from our audience right now. Drop us a comment. What are the gas prices like where you live? You're out there in you're like in Alaska or something, right?
Yeah, I'm in Washington State, and we're at like $5.89, I think is what I paid. And I wanted to bring something up about this conversation as well that I'm kind of curious about. Like, when did the Treasury stop being part of the conversation? You remember back in like even 2008, they would talk about the Treasury. We don't hear about that anymore. They don't respond to anything.
No, Janet Yellen, I mean, just last week admitted she got it wrong on inflation. So she is the Treasury Secretary, but she punted. They punt to the Federal Reserve. Again, these are unelected people, and these central bankers are unelected, and they control everything. And again, I have been beating this drum because it's true and it's real, and they've told us it's real, and the plan is unfolding from the World Economic Forum that they want to consolidate power. As Carol Roth on our show talked about, this is the greatest transfer of wealth we've ever seen in world history. The greatest transfer of wealth we've ever seen.
Yes.
And they are consolidating power. And by the way, when you think about these interest rate hikes, who gets screwed here? Who gets screwed in all of this? I mean, it's the little
home
people. Home buyers. Who can you name anybody else? Gas buyers, food buyers, family buyers. Yes,
anyone who's buying consumer loans, right?
Right.
So, I mean, this Fed interest rate is not the interest rate that you will pay, right? Because it started at zero. Certainly, you weren't being offered free money.
Right.
0% dollars, right? So then it went to 0.5% in May. Now we're up another 0.75%. So we're up to 1.25%. And that is sort of a bottom level usury rate by which other lenders base their loans off of. But usually the consumer price is 3 to 4 points higher than that, right? So those 2% interest rates we saw on home loans during the pandemic, good thing if you got one, right?
Linda Spain in our chat says 449 in Mississippi, which, usually areas of the country where gas would be cheaper, right? Mississippi, a Gulf state, right? Mm-hmm. So areas. So Linda Spain saying, and then you see Jim Taylor 449 in Conway, Arkansas. We know in California, they keep saying $6, but there's people in Los Angeles and others who are saying it's upwards of $7, $8, $8. Like we keep hearing this like $6 in California. Like where in California are you getting $6 gas? It's way higher than that at this point.
Now we have a super chat from the new Joe who says the low interest rates was one of the major problems. And I 100% agree. Keeping interest rates low has been a government perversion. Again, here's me using this word again, but every time governments pervert free markets, we're going to talk about this later when we talk about baby formula as well.
Well, it is hump day, so you can be perverted.
Every time governments pervert markets, right, it is holding there is something that wants to be happening that's being bottled that will come for us eventually. Like the 2008, crazy spending that the government went on, we never felt that because of this whack problem, this Walmart, Amazon, China that kept our prices low. So we have been waiting for the consequences of government perversion for, I want to say, 12 years, 14 years. So those of us who followed economics knew that this correction had to happen and was coming. And it hurts, but we're not surprised. What do you want to know?
I want to know how many of those companies not only got the 0% loans, but how many got subsidies on top of it, actually made money from those loans?
Oh, good question. I'm glad you asked that question because I actually happen to have a chart. I have a chart here. So let's go to this, and then we'll get to Biden in a second. But let me just explain what you're seeing here. This is a really important chart. Okay. So I put on your little wonky hat for a moment, and I let me actually come back to me for a second, because on this show, this is not like a mainstream media show where we're just going to quickly move on and not give you any context. Our goal on doing this show is to provide nuance, to provide some context for things, a little bit deeper analysis here on the show, because we have the time. It's our channel. We can do whatever the hell we want. So the Federal Reserve in 2008, put the chart back up, please, if you'd be so kind. In 2008, what we did, the Federal Reserve in 2008 created about $1 trillion in the Federal Reserves, okay, fake currency during the housing crisis. But they didn't actually create bank money during the housing crisis. You see that in green right there? They didn't actually do that. What they did in blue is the federal digital liabilities in the purple blue line. Okay. And so the billions in the M2, the banking sector, basically stayed the same. And then what happened is that during this pandemic, they created 3.5 trillion in the year 2020, 3.5 trillion at the Federal Reserve. Then on top of that, this time around, they added 3.5 trillion to the banks. That's $7 trillion that they created and float 3.5 to the banks. Now just 3.5 in their own reserves, and it's all fake.
Is it because they eliminated fractional reserve? Is that what you're saying?
In part, they eliminated the fractional reserve. That was a huge piece of what they did in 2020. But what they did was provided enormous liquidity to the banks. And the idea was that the banks were going to be lending like crazy. They were going to be providing all sorts of low interest loans to individuals and doing what they could. But a lot of these banks, the reason their profits are through the roof is because they artificially inflated their stocks by buying their own stocks back. So they bought their own stocks back, artificially inflated their value. That's why the banks are doing great on the backs of fake money. So this inflation was all inevitable. It was all like a plan. David, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, so rather than the Treasury printing the money, it was never printed. They just went in the computer and added some zeros.
Yeah, there's no printing of this money. There's no additional cash because remember they told us during COVID cash would have COVID on it. So you weren't allowed to touch paper dollars or coins because it had COVID on it. Literally, that's what they said.
Well, but even less than 4% of the money in the American economy exists in paper form anyway. So they didn't need to, right? Money is a system of beliefs that we all sort of get on board with.
So take my laptop if you would mind, Philip, here. So this is a little wrap up of what Fed Chair Jerome Powell just said a few minutes ago. And I like that the Fed Chair did say that the central banks cannot control all of the factors driving inflation, such as oil prices that have been pushed higher. So he's basically passing the buck here. I'm telling you what, oil prices have almost nothing to do with this. Absolutely, I mean, almost virtually nothing to do with this. The inflation has nothing to do with the price of oil. Like the cost of oil is because of, and we've talked about on this show before, the production of oil. Like that's it, right? And we'll get to sanctions in a few moments on exactly why we're feeling this.
And Saudi Arabia, which we will get to in a few moments as well. Yes.
But all of these factors driving inflation, the Fed Chair says, we don't control everything. No, you do, actually. You do control everything. You are literally working hand in hand with these other central banks and you control everything. And that's why we're screwed right now. And the banks are fine. They're going to be fine. The little guy's going to be screwed. And that's just how it goes. But don't worry. President Biden spoke last night on the economy. Here's President Biden's plan to make sure that we fix this inflation problem. Listen.
What is this? Under my plan for the economy, we made extraordinary progress. And we put America in a position to tackle a worldwide problem is worse everywhere but here, inflation.
So he went on to say, we're going to tax the rich. Billionaires need to pay their fair share. That's our plan. That's my plan to combat inflation. You want to take this one?
No, I mean, there's a lot of little things there that I'd like to pick apart, like this, it's worse everywhere but here bit, right? And that's not true. There are countries that are doing actually pretty okay right now, but he's trying to tell you, you never had it so good.
Well, you know, we on this show talk a lot about reckless spending, right? I mean, we've been talking about this for months on this, or for quite a long time, right? The idea that we're going to send, I don't know, billions to wars around the world. We're going to continue to funnel the $850 billion to the defense budget, to the military-industrial complex, and not take care of our people at home, not fix our roads and bridges, not provide health care for people. And so President Biden last night, he's so fed up. Listen to how angry he is about me. He's talking about me. I really feel like he's talking about me, about all of this talk about reckless spending. He's sick of it. Listen.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
Can you play that again, Philip? I just like how indignant he is. Play it again.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
I don't want to hear any more of those lies either.
He's changing people's lives.
We're
David.
like that on this. I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear lies
I mean, to be
about
fair,
how
he didn't
reckless
say he's changing
spending
them in
is
a
not
positive way.
right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he doesn't want to hear any more about reckless spending. Like he just wants to spend as much as possible. He doesn't want to hear about it. He just wants to make sure that billionaires are paying their fair share. Like that's going to solve everything. Is that if billionaires pay their fair share of what? I don't know exactly. But then we're going to fix everything.
Then they're going to take the money from the billionaires, just like Elon Musk has said. He's like, why would I want to give this inefficient government more money to waste? Because all they're going to do is take that money, and the military is going to be like, oh my gosh, we've got more, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. You know, we've been banned, we've been blocked, we've been censored. That's why we started our own website to stay connected with you for free.
That's right. So head on over to redacted.inc and make sure you're connected with us. You can sign up again at redacted.inc, not .com.